toddlers use both costs and benefits in their early helping behavior. So as probably most of you guys know, because we're all kind of in the same social cognition, we study social cognition, that previous research has shown a lot of evidence that from a young age, even young infants will help others, right? So they pick up out-of-reach objects for experimenters. They'll help them, for instance, if their hands are full, to open cabinet doors. And we see that these young infants and toddlers will not only help in these experimental settings, but they also help us at home as well. So from a young age, right, there's a lot of evidence that's recently come out suggesting that these infants and toddlers do help. However, I think one of the big open questions that we're still trying to answer is why are toddlers helping in these types of situations? So I would like to argue today that I think that pro-social behavior is kind of like any other decision-making process we make in our everyday lives. So if you choose, I don't know, if baby's thinking about what toy they want to play with, right? You're going and making these types of active decisions and you're thinking about the costs and benefits. So when a toddler might see that these two people need help reaching a toy, just like these other decision-making processes, they have to first decide whether or not they're going to act. So am I going to actually help this person or am I not going to help this person? They also have to decide how to act. So right, if there's two different people that need help, they have to decide who they want to help or how they're going to help. And additionally, right, as I was saying before, right, they might be also actively considering the costs and benefits. And traditional research, I think, and also in our lay intuitions, why we think that people help, might have a lot to do with first just thinking toddlers might be really motivated by other people's needs. So in these types of past studies, when this person needs help, they might be really focusing on this experimenter. Like, right, she might be upset, she can't quite reach her goal, like it's clear that she needs help. And there is some evidence that's recently come out suggesting that toddlers may be really caring about this person's needs. So, for example, in early studies, we see that kids will only help in experimental conditions. They won't help in controlled conditions. So, for example, if this person showed earlier that her goal was to put these books on top of the shelf, babies won't spontaneously open shelves, so they do seem to be considering the person's needs to some extent. And some more recent work has kind of started to nail this down. So a paper that literally came out this past month found that 3-year-olds are more likely to help people that show more need than someone that shows less need. And then there's going to be an awesome poster in that next poster session, also studying this with 24-month-olds, suggesting that 24-month-olds also might be more likely to help when this actor has more of a need compared to when an experimenter doesn't have as great of a need. So there is evidence to suggest that toddlers do care about needs. However, there also is recent work maybe suggesting that toddlers do also care about the costs and benefits. So for example, in this type of situation, they haven't actually tested it in this situation, you can imagine that toddlers might be less likely to help if this was really heavy and they had to try for 30 minutes to open the cabinet. Maybe we wouldn't be as motivated to help than if it was pretty easy. And there is one study that we recently published finding that toddlers are less likely to help when it is a more physical effort. And additionally, it really is this decision-making process. We should see that toddlers are more likely when they're likely to help when there might be some kind of benefit. We do, at least I think that maybe toddlers might consider affiliative benefits, and they do selectively help others. So in this type of situation, this motivation might be toddlers really considering the recipient. So knowing who this person is, maybe also if this person is nice, like all of Kylie's studies, they might be more likely to want to help them. And research in specifically instrumental helping paradigms have found that toddlers are more likely to help people who share their preferences compared to people that don't share their preferences. They're more likely to help people who are fair over people who are unfair, and they're more likely to help people who have positive intentions over people that have negative intentions. So I think in all of these situations, you could argue that it would be more beneficial to interact with fair people over people who are unfair. And toddlers might want to align themselves with people who have, are more fair than unfair, or positive intentions over people with negative intentions. So in my study today, I'm going to be looking at kind of what is the primary motivation, or what do toddlers kind of prioritize in their early helping behavior. And that's not to say that they don't use all of these motivations. There's evidence that they do. But first we're going to look at do toddlers consider needs, or if we pit needs against kind of maybe potential social affiliation benefits, which one are they going to use or kind of use to primarily motivate their early helping. And then later I'm going to look and see if toddlers consider costs when these are pitted against kind of these different benefits. And so in order to manipulate that, we use resource wealth to kind of facilitate need. So the reason we did this is past research with both children and adults finds that we think that people who have less resources or are more poor per se might need more help than someone who has more resources. And so if we do find, if we pit these two things together, are toddlers more likely to help people who are resource rich versus resource poor? It might be that if toddlers are helping people who are resource poor, they might be like young children and adults who care about this, and that might be evidence that they are really considering other people's needs when helping. I also argue that if they're helping resource-rich people and resource-poor people equally, that also might be evidence that they're really caring about the person's needs, because in a helping situation, if they're asked to help someone who's resource-rich versus resource-poor, if they both need help, right, if you really care about their need in the moment, it would be, if you care about need, you should help both of them. However, if toddlers are just selectively helping resource-rich people, this might be evidence that they do really care about maybe these potential type of affiliated benefits and aren't prioritizing need as much. So in our study, we manipulated resource wealth separately from helping tasks. We didn't want to conflate anything in the tasks. So for example, if we manipulated that one person seems like they were needed more help in a helping task, they might seem less competent or something else. So we completely separated these two things. So first, all toddlers, and these are 18-month-old toddlers, saw experimenters show these bowls of goods. Always one experimenter was like resource rich and had lots of things, and always the other experimenter was resource poor and had very few things. We kind of hit babies over the head with this information. So the resource rich person had bowls of cookies, bowls of balls, bowls of light of rings, so they always had lots of stuff. And the other person always had very few things. You can see she only got 3 small things in her bowl. And then after showing toddlers this information, we had them engage in a helping task. So both actors built block towers, and there was one block left behind to finish their tower, and they requested the baby's help to bring them that block. So in this study, it was equally hard to help both experimenters. They were equally far away from the toddlers. And so, going back to that hypothesis I just walked you through, just to reiterate, if toddlers really care about maybe other people's needs, we might expect, right, these people are equally needy, they both need the block, they might help that chance, or if they care about that person's prior needs that they have less, they might be more likely to help the person who had less before. However, if they care about those potential affiliated benefits, then we might see that they're helping this person who had more stuff. So what did we actually find? So I have chance graphs, so if they're helping equally, so 50%. And what we found is that actually toddlers were way more likely to help the person who previously had more stuff than the person who had less stuff. So what does this mean? So one, I think that toddlers are considering other needs besides they're considering other things just besides the person's needs when helping, right? If they just cared about helping in the moment, they should help both actors equally. But that's not what they were doing. Additionally, we found, right, some evidence that toddlers are caring about this prior wealth information. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the conclusion. Why are they helping that rich person? Additionally, in order to kind of do this and be more likely to help that rich actor compared to that poor actor, they actually had to encode that wealth information. So during the helping task, they didn't have any information about which person had more versus less. So they had to be actively somehow encoding it. Whether or not they remember that consciously or unconsciously, we don't know. But they have to remember it in some kind of capacity to differentially help the two people. And so again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the conclusion, but maybe they're helping the rich individual because they might find it beneficial or want to align with that person. So now, right, in experiment 1, there's some evidence that they're not just helping based on need. So in experiment 2, I wanted to see, is this just like typical decision-making behaviors where they are really considering costs and benefits? So what happens if we up the ante and make it more, change the costs of the situation? So in experiment 2, toddlers saw the same wealth information as experiment 1, and then they had the opportunity to help again that previously resource poor individual versus the resource rich individual. But this time we changed the cost of helping, so now the resource rich person was much further away, so the toddlers had to walk further in order to help her than the person who had less. So what do toddlers do there? If they really cared maybe about the benefits or just really like helping people who have more stuff, or maybe they think they're going to get more stuff, we should see that they should continue to help this person that they saw have more stuff. However, if they do kind of really treat helping like this cost-benefit analysis, maybe they would actually change their helping behavior. Maybe they wouldn't completely switch over to help the poor person, but they would change it in some way or modify their helping behavior. And what we found here, so this is just comparing, this is the first experiment data, is we actually found a complete reversal of who toddlers were choosing to help. So here they were actually helping the person who is resource poor, who is a lot closer to them and easier to help. So it does seem like maybe they're really considering the costs in these types of situations. So again, right, toddlers were completely modifying their behavior based on the location, and they might be minimizing their physical effort when helping. However, one thing you might have noticed when you watched or were looking at like the pictures is that in these types of tasks, the toddler kind of almost had to pass by this poor person to get to the rich person. And as an adult, if both Kylie and Kelsey need help, I might be kind of a jerk if I like whacked by Kylie to help Kelsey, right? That would be kind of a mean thing to do. So maybe it's like a pragmatic oddity. It's not that they're really caring about costs, but they just don't want to pass by one person in order to help another person. So in experiment 3, we did an additional test to see if it really was cost. So here it was more, we made it more distance, but instead it was more, do toddlers go to the left versus the right instead of having to pass by one person instead of the other person in order to help. And again, we found the same pattern of results. So toddlers, again, were going to the person who is closer and easier to help rather than walking the long distance to help the person who is further away. So we think that at least this is some evidence that they do really care about physical costs, and it wasn't something weird about experiment 2, that one person was further away. So in conclusion, I feel like the big question that this study always makes me think about is why were toddlers really helping that resource-rich person over that poor person? And so one possibility is that toddlers might have preferences for wealthy individuals, and they're more likely to help people they prefer. I think that this possibility might be a little bit, or might not be the best explanation of it, because research with children has actually found that children also have preferences for wealthy, but they're actually not more likely to want to give to them or act pro-socially towards them. They'll actually correct inequities. So I think that that can't tell the entire story. Another possibility that I thought about a lot too is that maybe toddlers think that they get some concrete benefits. So maybe because the rich person has more stuff, maybe they think that that person is going to share their cookies or the cool light-up toys that they showed them earlier. But I also think that this possibility is less likely too, for the reason that there's been some prior studies, Michael Warnikin, suggesting that toddlers are actually less likely to help when they get material benefits. So if you give them rewards for helping, they actually decrease their helping behavior. So I think maybe it could be this idea of affiliative benefits, like we want to align ourselves with some people over others, right? We care about whether people are helpful versus hinderers, whether people are fair versus unfair. So maybe toddlers want to kind of align themselves with these people who have more versus less. But again, jury's still out. These studies can't test between these different possibilities. So I think there's a lot of really cool open questions and new directions for future research. And then kind of broadly, I just wanted to leave you with a kind of bigger picture conclusion that I think these studies kind of show us maybe is that I do think that these studies suggest that toddlers do prioritize their own costs or their own costs and benefits and other motivational factors of themselves over the needs of another person. And this is just shown by that they modified their helping behavior both on recipient wealth and the effort required to help. So thanks to all the awesome people that helped run these participants and my advisor, Jessica Somerville.